The key turned in the lock with the same familiar click it always had, but somehow the sound felt different now. She stood in the doorway of what used to be their home, 2 suitcases at her feet, rehearsed words dying on her lips. "You're back," he said from the kitchen. Not a question. A simple statement of fact, delivered in a tone that made her stomach tighten with something she couldn't quite name. He didn't rush to greet her, didn't embrace her or demand explanations. He simply continued chopping vegetables with methodical precision, his movements economical and calm. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the space between them, a space that felt vast despite the modest dimensions of their kitchen. "Graham, she started, her voice cracking slightly. "I made a terrible mistake. I need you to understand." "The guest room is made up," he interrupted gently, not looking up from his cutting board. "Fresh towels are in the bathroom cabinet. I'm making dinner for one, but there's sandwich material in the fridge if you're hungry." She blinked, thrown completely off balance. This wasn't the script she'd prepared for. Where was the anger? The tears? The desperate questions about why and how and with whom? "That's it. That's all you have to say to me." Her voice rose with a mixture of confusion and indignation. She'd expected many things during the long drive home: rage, heartbreak, perhaps even relief. But this cool politeness was somehow worse than all of them. Graham finally looked up, and she was struck by how different his eyes seemed. The warmth that used to live there, the softness that used to melt whenever he looked at her, it was gone. Not replaced with hatred or hurt, but with something far more unsettling: neutrality. "What would you like me to say, Diane?" he asked. "You left 4 months ago. You made your choice. You chose him, chose that excitement, that passion, whatever it was you thought you were missing here." He returned to his vegetables. "I'm assuming it didn't work out the way you planned." The accuracy of his words hit like a slap. Trevor had been everything Graham wasn't: spontaneous, passionate, dangerous in all the ways that had felt thrilling rather than threatening. Until suddenly they didn't. Until the intensity she'd craved revealed itself as instability. Until the passion showed its true face as possession. It wasn't what I thought," she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. "I was wrong, Graham. I was so wrong. But we can fix this. We've been together for 12 years. That has to mean something." It did mean something, he said, and for the first time, she heard a faint edge beneath the calm. "It meant everything to me." Past tense. "Past tense," she repeated, the words settling over her like ice water. "Graham, please. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed your trust. But I'm here now. I'm choosing you. Doesn't that count for something?" He set down his knife and finally turned to face her fully. "You're not choosing me, Diane. You're choosing the safety net you kept in place. There's a difference. That's not fair." "Fair?" His laugh was soft, almost sad. "You're talking to me about fair. You moved in with another man. You posted photos on social media of your new, exciting life. You sent me divorce papers, which I signed, by the way. They're on the dining room table. My lawyer finalized everything last week." The room tilted. "What? No. I never. Those papers were just. I didn't think you'd actually sign them." "What did you think I'd do?" Graham asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Wait around hoping you'd come back after you were done exploring your options? Hold our life in suspended animation while you figured out if the grass was actually greener?" She had thought exactly that, she realized with growing horror. She'd thought he would be here, hurt and angry perhaps, but ultimately waiting. Ready to forgive, ready to rebuild, ready to prove he could be enough. The divorce papers sat on the dining room table like an accusation. Diane's hands trembled as she picked them up, scanning the signatures, the dates, the finality of legal language that reduced 12 years to a series of asset divisions and custody arrangements for a dog they didn't have. "You can't just, we need to talk about this," she said, following Graham back into the kitchen. "We need counseling, we need time." "We needed those things 4 months ago," he replied, plating his dinner with the same careful attention he gave everything now. When you were packing your bags, that would have been the time for counseling. When you were choosing him over me, that would have been the time for conversation. So what? You've just moved on. In 4 months. She heard the hysteria creeping into her voice and hated it, but couldn't stop it. You're telling me 12 years meant so little you could just let go? Graham paused, his back still to her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. No, Diane. It meant so much that watching you leave nearly destroyed me. I spent the first month barely functional. I called in sick to work. I didn't sleep. I replayed every conversation, every moment, trying to figure out where I'd failed you. He turned then, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, a shadow of the pain he'd carried. But it was distant, like watching a storm that had already passed. The second month, I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Patricia Winters. She's excellent, if you need a recommendation. She helped me understand that I didn't fail you. You made a choice. And I couldn't control that choice, couldn't prevent it, couldn't fix it by being better or different or more exciting. Diane felt tears streaming down her face now. Graham, please. The third month, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken, I started rebuilding. I joined that cycling group I'd always talked about. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I discovered I actually enjoy cooking when I'm doing it for myself, not trying to meet someone else's standards. And the 4th month. He smiled slightly, and it was like looking at a stranger. The 4th month, I realized I was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. For the first time in years. The implication hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. You weren't happy with me, she whispered. You're saying you weren't happy in our marriage. Were you? He countered. Before Trevor, before the affair, were you happy? Really happy? Or were we both just comfortable, going through the motions, too afraid of change to admit we'd grown into different people? I don't believe that. I don't believe you feel nothing for me. She moved closer, reaching for his arm, but he stepped back smoothly, maintaining distance. I didn't say I feel nothing, Graham said. I have years of memories, of shared experiences. I hope you find happiness, Diane. I genuinely do. But I don't want to be your fallback plan. I don't want to be the safe choice you settle for when the exciting choice doesn't work out. That's not what this is. Isn't it? He picked up his plate. Let me ask you something. If things with Trevor had worked out, if he'd been everything you hoped, would you be standing in this kitchen right now? The silence that followed was answer enough. You can stay here for a week, Graham said, walking toward his study. That should give you time to find an apartment. I'll sleep in here. The guest room is yours. We'll divide the rest of the belongings this weekend. I've already set aside everything I thought you'd want. My lawyer will send you the contact information for mediation if there are any disputes. Graham, wait, but he'd already closed the study door behind him, the soft click of the lock somehow louder than if he'd slammed it. Diane stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the ghost of their life together. The coffee maker they'd bought on their honeymoon. The ridiculous rooster-shaped timer she'd insisted on. The photograph on the refrigerator from their trip to Vancouver. Both of them laughing, wrapped in each other's arms. When had that couple disappeared? When had the easy affection turned to routine, the comfortable silence to distant disconnect? She'd blamed Graham for not being exciting enough, for being too predictable, too stable. But standing here now, she wondered if she'd been blaming him for her own fear of standing still, her own inability to appreciate what she had. Her phone buzzed. Trevor's name flashed on the screen. Baby, please. We can work this out. I'm sorry. I love you. She deleted the message without reading it fully. She'd deleted dozens just like it over the past 2 weeks, since she'd finally seen Trevor's passion for what it really was, manipulation dressed up as intensity. But Graham's words echoed in her mind. If things had worked out with Trevor, would she be here? The truth was a bitter pill. She'd kept the house key. Kept Graham's number in her favorites. Kept the door open in her mind, just in case. And Graham had known. Had seen through her completely. She'd come home expecting to find him broken, ready to forgive anything just to have her back. Instead, she'd found a man who'd built a life without her. The week stretched ahead like a prison sentence. Diane unpacked her suitcases in the guest room, a room that used to be Graham's home office before he'd apparently moved his workspace to the study. The walls were a neutral beige now, devoid of the personal touches that had marked every other space in their home. No photographs, no artwork, no memories. Just a bed, a dresser, and a vague scent of lavender from the detergent Graham always used. She lay awake that first night, listening to the sounds of the house. The familiar groan of the pipes. The hum of the refrigerator. And beneath it all, silence from Graham's study. No sounds of restless movement, no indication that this affected him at all. The next morning, she woke to find him already gone. A note on the kitchen counter, his handwriting neat and impersonal. Gone to work. Back around 6. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. G. Not love, Graham, or even just Graham. Just an initial, like she was a house guest he barely knew. Diane made coffee and found herself wandering through the house, cataloguing the changes. The living room had been rearranged. His reading chair now occupied the prime spot by the window where her decorative chair used to sit. Books she didn't recognize filled the shelves, titles about philosophy, cycling, Japanese cooking. The television was gone entirely, replaced by a record player and a collection of vinyl she'd never seen before. In the kitchen, the magnetic poetry words she'd put on the refrigerator, silly romantic phrases they used to rearrange for each other, were gone. In their place hung a single photograph, and she had to look twice before she understood what she was seeing. Graham, tanned and grinning, standing with a group of people in cycling gear at the top of some mountain trail. He looked vibrant, alive, genuinely joyful. She didn't recognize him. Her phone rang. Her mother's number. Diane ignored it. She'd called her parents from Trevor's apartment 2 weeks ago, sobbing, admitting everything. Her mother's disappointment had been palpable even through the phone line. What did you expect would happen? She'd asked quietly. Did you think Graham would just be waiting there, like a coat you'd left in the closet? At the time, Diane had been offended by the comparison. Now, standing in this house that no longer felt like hers, she realized how accurate it was. She spent the day drafting text messages to Graham that she never sent. Apologies that felt hollow even as she typed them. Explanations that sounded like excuses. Pleas that reeked of desperation. She deleted them all. Graham returned home at 6:15, carrying groceries and a new book. Evening, he said pleasantly, as if greeting a colleague. I picked up some of that tea you like, chamomile, right? Thought you might want some while you're here. The casual thoughtfulness somehow hurt more than anger would have. Thank you, she managed. No problem. He began unpacking groceries, moving around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. I have my cycling group tonight at 7. I'll be back around 9:30. Feel free to use the TV. Oh, wait. I got rid of it. There's a laptop in the office if you want to stream something. You got rid of the TV. She remembered the arguments about that television. She'd wanted the biggest screen available. He'd thought it was excessive. She'd won, as she usually did. Didn't need it, he said simply. I was watching out of habit, not enjoyment. Turns out I prefer reading. Another piece of the old Graham, gone. You loved watching basketball, she said weakly. I thought I did. Actually, I think I loved having something to do that didn't require much engagement. He glanced at her, and for a moment, something like sympathy crossed his face. Diane, I know this is hard. But I need you to understand, the man you left 4 months ago doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never really existed at all. Maybe he was just who I thought I was supposed to be. So who are you now? She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Graham considered the question seriously. I'm someone who knows what he wants. Someone who doesn't compromise on the things that matter. Someone who won't accept being someone's second choice. He checked his watch. I need to change. There's lasagna in the fridge from yesterday if you're hungry. He disappeared upstairs, and Diane found herself sinking onto a kitchen stool, her mind reeling. Every conversation with Graham felt like trying to grab smoke. There was nothing to hold on to, no anger to deflect, no guilt to manipulate, no wounded pride to soothe. Just this calm, impenetrable certainty. When he came back down in cycling gear, he looked like someone from that photograph, vital, present, engaged with his life. "Don't wait up," he said, grabbing his water bottle. "Oh, and Diane? I think we should do the property division tomorrow evening instead of this weekend. Better to get it done." The door closed behind him before she could respond. She sat alone in the kitchen as the evening light faded, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage she'd thought she could return to at will. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Trevor, another plea she didn't bother reading. For the first time, it occurred to her that she hadn't just lost Graham. She'd lost herself too, somewhere in the chaos of thinking she needed more excitement, more passion, more something she couldn't even name. She'd mistaken stability for stagnation, mistaken Graham's quiet strength for weakness. And now she was paying the price. The next evening, Graham set up a systematic operation in the dining room. He'd created a spreadsheet, of course he had, with tabs for furniture, kitchen items, decor, books, and miscellaneous belongings. 2 columns, Diane and Graham, with a third labeled Discuss. "I've pre-filled what I thought made sense," he explained, his tone businesslike, as if conducting a meeting at work. "Obviously, the things you brought into the marriage are yours. The things I brought are mine. Everything we acquired together, I've tried to divide fairly. If you disagree with anything, we can talk through it." Diane stared at the laptop screen, at the meticulous organization of their life together reduced to rows and columns. "You've been planning this," she said. "Even before I came back, you were ready for this." "I was ready for multiple possibilities," Graham acknowledged. "This was one of them." "What were the others?" He glanced at her, then back at the screen. "Does it matter? This is the reality we're in. The coffee table is in your column. You picked it out. The bookshelf is in mine. The kitchen table is under Discuss because we bought it together and I think we both have attachment to it." "I don't care about the table, Graham." The words burst out before she could stop them. "I don't care about any of this. I care about us, about what we had." "What we had ended when you left," he said, not unkindly. "These are just things, Diane. Just objects. They need to be divided because we're no longer sharing a life. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary." She found herself crying again, the tears coming hot and frustrated. "How are you so calm about all this? Don't you feel anything?" Graham closed the laptop and looked at her fully for the first time since she'd returned. "I feel a lot of things. Relief that I'm no longer waiting for you to decide if I'm enough. Sadness for what we could have been if we'd been braver earlier, if we'd admitted years ago that we were growing apart. Regret that we wasted time pretending everything was fine when it wasn't." He paused. "But mostly, I feel clarity. And that's not something I'm willing to give up, not even for the comfort of falling back into old patterns. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," he corrected gently. "And I'm making mine. You chose to leave, to explore what else was out there, to see if someone else could give you whatever you felt was missing. That was your right, Diane. You weren't happy. I can accept that now. But you don't get to choose for both of us twice. You don't get to leave and then decide, when it doesn't work out, that we'll go back to how things were. So that's it. 12 years, just over." Her voice cracked on the last word. "The 12 years already happened," Graham said. "They're part of my history, part of what made me who I am. I don't regret them, not all of them. We had good times, real moments of connection. But yes, that chapter is over. It was over the moment you decided what we had wasn't enough." Diane wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "And what if I fight this? What if I refuse to make it easy?" Something flickered across Graham's face. Disappointment, maybe, or sadness. "You could do that. You could drag this out, make it ugly, try to hurt me the way you're hurting. But I don't think you will. Because underneath everything, underneath the choices you made, I think you're a decent person who knows that wouldn't change anything. It would just make us both miserable for longer." He was right, and she hated that he was right. She thought of Trevor's messages, his anger when she tried to leave, his accusations and manipulation. Graham was offering her dignity in this ending, even after everything she'd done. "The apartment we looked at last year," she said suddenly. "The one near the waterfront, before we decided to stay here. It's still available. I checked." Graham nodded slowly. "That's a good location. Close to your work." "Yeah." She drew a shaky breath. "I could be out by this weekend. If you want. You don't have to rush." "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "You're right. Being here, pretending there's a chance, it's not fair to either of us. I'll take the coffee table, the reading chair from our old bedroom, and about half the kitchen stuff. You can have everything else." "Diane." "I mean it. I don't want to drag this out either." She stood up, needing to move, to do something with the energy coursing through her. "Can I ask you one thing, though? And will you give me an honest answer?" Graham waited. "Did you ever love me? Really love me? Or was I just convenient?" The question hung in the air between them. Graham was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was softer than it had been in days. "I loved you enormously," he said. "When we met, you were this bright, ambitious force, and I was drawn to that. I loved the life we built, the routines we created, the way we fit together, for a time. But somewhere along the way, we stopped growing together and started growing apart. I didn't see it, or I didn't want to see it. I thought love was enough, that commitment meant holding on no matter what." He met her eyes. "But love isn't about holding on. It's about being present, being honest, being willing to change together. We stopped doing that. Maybe years ago. And by the time you left, I think we were both in love with the idea of each other, the memory of what we'd been, more than the reality of who we'd become." Diane felt something inside her crack open, not the desperate need to fix things, but a grief for what they'd lost long before she'd ever met Trevor. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For all of it. For not being brave enough to tell you I was unhappy. For choosing to hurt you instead of talking to you. For thinking I could have it both ways." "I know," Graham said. "And I'm sorry too. For not seeing what you needed. For getting so comfortable that I stopped trying. For not being willing to shake up our life before you felt like you had to burn it down to feel alive." They sat in the silence of mutual understanding, of shared fault, of an ending that maybe had been inevitable all along. Moving day came with unseasonable warmth for autumn. Diane had hired movers for the furniture, but she'd insisted on packing the personal items herself. Graham had offered to be out of the house, to make it easier, but she'd declined. Something about doing this together felt necessary, a final acknowledgement of what they'd shared. He made coffee while she packed boxes in the living room, labeling each one in her neat handwriting. When he brought her a mug, prepared exactly how she liked it, even now, she accepted it with a sad smile. "You're still thoughtful," she said. "Even after everything." "Being angry takes energy I'd rather spend elsewhere," Graham replied, sitting on the arm of his reading chair, the one he was keeping. "Besides, this isn't about punishment. It's just about moving forward. Are you seeing anyone?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Graham gave her a look that might have been amusement. "Would it matter if I was?" "I don't know. Maybe I just want to know if there's someone making you happy." "I'm making myself happy," he said. "That's the difference now. I'm not looking for someone else to complete me or validate me or make me feel alive. If someone comes along who adds to my life, who wants to build something together, then maybe. But I'm in no hurry." Diane taped up another box. "I joined a therapy group," she offered. "For people who've self-sabotaged their relationships. Turns out there are a lot of us." "That's good," Graham said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Dr. Winters always says the work we do on ourselves is the most important work we ever do." "You still see her?" "Every week. Probably will for a while." He sipped his coffee. "She's helping me understand patterns I've carried my whole life. The people-pleasing, the conflict avoidance, the tendency to lose myself in someone else's needs. Turns out I have just as much work to do as you do. The movers arrived at noon, and the process of physically dismantling their shared life began. The coffee table she'd chosen went into the truck. The bookshelf he'd built stayed behind. In a way, it felt like watching a living thing being divided, painful but necessary, like separating conjoined twins who'd been slowly suffocating each other. By late afternoon, the truck was loaded and Diane stood in the now sparse living room, her remaining boxes stacked by the door. The house looked strange with so much empty space, like a mouth with missing teeth. "I think that's everything," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the emptiness. Graham walked through the rooms with her one final time, checking closets and cabinets. In the back of the bedroom closet, he found a showbox she'd missed. "What's this?" He pulled it out, and she recognized it immediately. "Letters," she said softly. "From when we were dating. When you were stationed overseas for that project and we wrote to each other." Graham opened the box, and she saw him touch the envelopes gently. "I'd forgotten about these." He read the return address on one. "You wrote me twice a week for 6 months." You wrote back every single time, she remembered. Even when you were exhausted, even when you had barely anything new to say. You always wrote back. They stood there, the box of letters between them, evidence of who they'd been, of the connection they'd once had. Young and hopeful and certain that their love could weather anything. "Do you want to split them?" Graham asked. "Half for each of us." Diane shook her head. "You keep them. I think I need to remember us as we were, but I don't need physical reminders. I need to let go." Graham nodded, understanding in his eyes. He set the box aside. "For what it's worth, I hope you find what you're looking for. Real happiness, not just excitement. Peace, not just passion." "I hope you find someone who appreciates what you have to offer," she replied. "Someone who sees your strength as strength, not boredom. Someone who wants to grow with you instead of away from you." At the door, they stood facing each other one last time. There was so much history between them, so many moments both beautiful and broken. Diane felt the urge to hug him, to try one more time to bridge the distance, but she resisted. That wasn't what he needed, and it wasn't what she needed either. "Goodbye, Graham," she said, extending her hand. He took it, his grip firm and warm and brief. "Goodbye, Diane. Take care of yourself." She walked to her car without looking back, knowing that if she did, she might shatter completely. The movers followed in their truck, carrying the fragments of her old life to her new apartment, her new beginning. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror once. Graham stood in the doorway, but he wasn't watching her leave. He was looking down at his phone, already moving forward with his day, with his life. It was exactly what she'd needed to see. That evening, in her new apartment surrounded by boxes, Diane sat on her coffee table, the one she'd insisted they buy despite Graham's concerns about the price, and she finally let herself grieve. Not just for the marriage, but for the person she'd been when she'd destroyed it. For the years she'd spent being dissatisfied without understanding why. For the love she'd thrown away because she'd thought there was something better waiting. Her phone buzzed. Not Trevor this time, she'd blocked him days ago. It was her therapist, Dr. Simmons, with a reminder about her group session tomorrow night. She typed back a confirmation, then put the phone aside and started unpacking. One box at a time, one decision at a time, she would build a new life. Not the life she'd imagined when she'd left Graham for Trevor, full of passion and excitement. Not the life she'd tried to return to, comfortable and familiar. But something else entirely, a life she built for herself, by herself, with honesty and intention and perhaps, eventually, wisdom. Across town, Graham sat on his porch with a glass of wine, the box of old letters beside him. He pulled one out at random and read it, smiling at the hopeful words of his younger self. Then he put it away, closed the box, and carried it to the closet where it would stay, a part of his history, but not his present. His phone chimed with a message from his cycling group. They were planning a weekend trip to the mountains. He typed back a yes, already looking forward to the challenge, the exertion, the company of friends who knew him as he was now, not as he'd been. Inside, the house felt spacious and full of possibility. He'd been thinking about converting the guest room into a proper art studio, something he'd always wanted but never made time for. Tomorrow, he'd start clearing it out, making space for something new. He thought of Diane briefly, hoped she was okay, hoped she'd find her way. Then he let the thought go, released it into the evening air like a bird finally set free. The hardest part was over. The distance that had grown between them was complete now, final. And in that finality, there was peace. For both of them, the real work was just beginning.